Okay friends, one of the first things we have to do to get to our four-wheel drive actuator is to remove this shield. Alright, so now with that out of the way, we have a nice clear view of where it's located. You're going to see that there's going to be 3 mounting bolts on it, one here, one there, and then one located up along the top. You're also going to notice that there's a wiring harness that goes into it, so of course we're going to have to remove that as well. So let's start with the wiring. You're going to notice that there's going to be a mounting bolt for it. Go ahead and remove that with an 8mm socket. Once you have that nice and loose, go ahead and grab onto the wiring, give it a nice wiggle, and draw it off. There we are. Take a peek in there, make sure you don't see any funny colors. If you see any colors, it's probably corrosion and it needs to be dealt with. Let's set this aside. What we're gonna have to do next is remove the U-joint caps right here. So you're gonna see that there's 2, and then if you were to spin the drive shaft, you're gonna find the other 2. Mark your drive shaft to the area on the differential where they meet up. That way there they'll match up when you put them back together. Let's go ahead and loosen these bolts. There's one. Let's do the same to the other 3. All right, get that off of there. Now we're just gonna go ahead and spin this drive shaft so we can do the same to the other side. Now I'm gonna take my pry bar and come up and in between this area here. And what we're gonna try to do is pry these caps away from the yoke itself. Just be very careful because the caps themselves have bearings inside. They need to stay with the actual drive shaft. There's one side. There we are. Just going to take that drive shaft and slide it up, just like that. Now we're going to come back here. Now back along this area here, we need to remove the drive shaft from the transfer case. I'm going to use a rubber mallet, that way there I don't cause any damage, but what you're going to end up seeing is the shaft from the transfer case slides into the actual drive shaft. We got plenty of room now. Now with the drive shaft out of the way, we have a clear view of our 3 mounting bolts. Go ahead and remove all 3. Whatever. All right, that one's out. All right, that's out. Let's get these out now. Go ahead and grab onto that, give it a nice wiggle and draw it away from the transfer case. And there it is, friends. Now the next thing we want to do is clean up this general area. You want to make sure that any dirt and debris is as far away from this as possible. Now that we have this area nice and clean and you can tell that there's no dirt or debris around where this seal is, we're going to move along to cleaning up this shaft area. Let's get off the majority of this grease, if not all of it, and then of course we'll reapply some more grease on there. So now it's going to be time to install our encoder motor. Before we go ahead and do that, I wanted to point out these 3 screws right along here. You don't want to actually touch those 3 screws, unless of course you need to make an adjustment after you've completed putting in the actuator. If for some reason your 4-wheel drive doesn't seem like it's completely going into a selection that you made, well then you might need to make an adjustment. If that's the case, just loosen these minorly and then give it a little bit of a twist. Let's go ahead and grab onto this yellow piece right here, get that right out of the way. Now we're just going to take this and we're going to put it right up on here. You want to pay attention to the slotted area on the encoder motor itself and line it up with the shaft on the transfer case. Now let's go ahead and put in our 3 mounting bolts. Once we get them all started, we'll snug them up and then we'll torque them to 15 foot-pounds. Now let's get our wiring back on. We're just going to snug this up and then bottom it out. Here we are. Now let's just use a little bit of grease on the transfer case output shaft. Now let's go ahead and put our drive shaft back on here. Let's bring that down, put the caps into where they belong. So now we're just going to inspect and clean these. You want to make sure that your threaded area is perfectly clean, and then we're going to add a little bit of red thread locker. Let's go ahead and get these caps on there, and of course our bolts. We'll start in all 4 and then we'll snug them up. Once they're snugged up, we'll bottom it out and then torque them to 15 foot-pounds as well. Okay, so now it's going to be time to get this cover back up on here. Just going to line up those front holes, and we'll line up the back holes, start in the bolts. Okay, so now you just need to get your truck down on the ground and then try out your four-wheel drive.